Look, I've been dealing with 5-year-olds for 15 years, so I thought I'd seen everything. Glue eating crayon up the nose, that one kid who somehow managed to get stuck in a desk drawer. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the day little Zephyr decided to have what I can only describe as a thermonuclear meltdown in my kindergarten classroom. Maya Torres, that's me. Burnt out doesn't even begin to cover it. I was running on coffee, spite, and the fading hope that my pension would kick in before I completely lost my mind. Roosevelt Elementary wasn't exactly the dream job. But hey, at least the kids couldn't literally destroy the building when they got upset. Or so I thought. Zephyr had been in my class for exactly 3 weeks, and in that time he'd managed to break 2 desks, melt a crayon box, and somehow make all the fish in our classroom aquarium glow bright blue. His parents, who I'd never actually met, always sent these impeccably dressed assistants to pick him up. Nice suits, weird accents, and they always seemed nervous around the kid. Red flag number 1. But honestly, I'd seen helicopter parents do weirder things. The day it all went sideways started normally enough. We were doing circle time, talking about feelings, the usual kindergarten stuff. Then little Timmy made the mistake of saying Zephyr's drawing looked stupid. Now, most kids would cry, maybe throw a crayon. Zephyr's eyes literally started glowing, and I swear the temperature in the room dropped to 10 degrees. "That's not nice, Timmy," I started to say, but then Zephyr opened his mouth and let out this sound. It wasn't crying, it wasn't screaming, it was like someone had taken a freight train and mixed it with a tornado. The windows started rattling, the supplies started floating off the shelves, and I'm pretty sure I saw my coffee mug levitate before exploding mid-air. Every other teacher would have panicked, would have called the principal, maybe the fire department, possibly NASA. But you know what 15 years of dealing with tiny humans teaches you? Sometimes you just have to out-stubborn them. "Zephyr," I said, using my teacher voice, the one that could cut through any chaos, timeout corner. "Now?" The floating stopped. The glowing dimmed. 23 other 5-year-olds stared at me like I'd just told a hurricane to sit down and think about what it had done. And you know what? It worked. Zephyr, this kid who had just defied several laws of physics, shuffled over to the timeout corner and sat down. 5 minutes later, he came back, apologized to Timmy, and we went back to circle time like nothing had happened. Just another Tuesday at Roosevelt Elementary, right? Wrong. Because apparently when you successfully discipline what I later learned was an alien prince with reality-bending tantrum powers, people notice. Important people. Specifically, the kind of people who travel faster than light and consider Earth a backwater planet that occasionally produces decent reality TV. I was cleaning up glitter from our art project when they arrived. 3 figures in those same fancy suits, except now I could see they weren't exactly human. Taller, with skin that had this weird metallic sheen, and eyes that were definitely not regulation human blue. They moved with the kind of precision that screamed military training, and they all looked at Zephyr like he was a live bomb. "Ms. Torres," the tallest one said, his accent now clearly not from anywhere on Earth. "We need to talk." So apparently, when aliens say we need to talk, what they really mean is pack a bag. You're coming with us to meet the most dangerous being in the known universe. They were very polite about it. I'll give them that. No probing, no cattle mutilation, just a very formal invitation that I couldn't exactly refuse, considering they'd already parked their invisible spaceship in the school parking lot. "This is a diplomatic transport," explained Commander Rax, the leader of Zephyr's bodyguard detail. Yes, bodyguards. For a kindergartner. I should have seen that red flag from orbit. The ship was nice, I'll admit. Way better than flying coach. They even had a beverage service, though I'm pretty sure the green stuff they offered me was either exotic juice or rocket fuel. Hard to tell with aliens. During the 3-hour journey to what I later learned was the capital planet of the Thex Empire, Commander Rax filled me in on the details. Zephyr wasn't just any alien kid. He was Prince Zephyr, heir to Emperor Thane, who had conquered roughly a third of the known galaxy before lunch most days. The emperor who made hardened warriors wet themselves just by entering a room. The guy who had personally ended 3 different galactic wars by showing up and asking very politely if everyone wanted to surrender. and this cosmic force of destruction couldn't get his 5-year-old to eat his vegetables. 17 nannies, Commander Rack said, shaking his metallic head. 17 highly trained child care specialists from across the galaxy. The longest any of them lasted was 6 days. What happened to them? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Various psychological breakdowns. One tried to join a monastery. Another moved to a small agricultural planet and now grows turnips. We don't talk about what happened to the Galactic Nanny of the Year. The palace was exactly what you'd expect from a galactic emperor. Massive, gleaming, and designed to make visitors feel appropriately insignificant. But walking through those halls, all I could think about was how many corners weren't child-proofed and whether they had any decent playgrounds. Emperor Thane was waiting in what I assumed was a throne room, though it looked more like a war room crossed with a very expensive office. He was huge, easily 7 feet tall, with the kind of presence that made you understand why entire planets surrendered rather than face him in battle. His armor looked like it could stop a meteor, and his cape probably cost more than my annual salary. He was also holding a juice box and looking completely defeated. "Ms. Torres," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been told no in his adult life, "Thank you for coming. We have a situation." The situation, as he explained it, was Prince Zephyr. The kid who had casually rearranged my classroom furniture with his mind was apparently holding back. At home, his tantrums could shatter reinforced steel, cause localized earthquakes, and on one memorable occasion, accidentally sent a diplomatic envoy into orbit. "I can command fleets," Thane said. "The most powerful being in 3 galaxies, sounding like every exhausted parent I'd ever met. I can negotiate treaties that reshape star systems. I can make grown warriors weep with a glance. But I cannot get my son to take a nap without destroying half the West Wing." They offered me a salary that had more zeros than I could count, full diplomatic immunity, and my own wing of the palace. The pension plan alone would have made my teachers' union weep with joy. But honestly, what sold me was the look in Thane's eyes. I'd seen it before, in every parent who'd ever sat across from me during a conference. Pure, desperate hope that someone, anyone, might have an answer. "All right," I said, because apparently my midlife crisis involved accepting a nanny position for an alien prince who could accidentally end civilizations. "But I do things my way. No interfering, no undermining my authority, and I want a fully stocked art supply closet. You'd be amazed what you can accomplish with finger paints and construction paper." Emperor Thane, conqueror of worlds, nodded eagerly and asked if I preferred the East Wing or the West Wing for my quarters. Living in an imperial palace designed by beings who consider interior decorating a form of warfare takes some adjustment. Everything was either made of gold, glowing mysteriously, or sharp enough to be considered a weapon. The bathroom faucets required a security clearance, and I'm pretty sure the toilet seat was carved from a single diamond. It was like living inside the world's most expensive and impractical museum. My first morning, I was awakened by Admiral Torres, Thane's military advisor, who had apparently appointed himself my orientation guide. Torres was the type of alien who spoke exclusively in dramatic proclamations and treated every conversation like a pre-battle speech. "Behold Maya Torres, hero of Earth," he announced, bursting into my room with enough fanfare for a royal coronation. "The dawn breaks upon your glorious mission to tame the young prince. Victory or death awaits." "It's 6 in the morning," I said, wondering if it was too late to take that turnip farming job. "And it's just babysitting." "Babysitting?" Torres looked personally offended. "This is a sacred duty. The fate of the Empire rests upon your ability to make the prince consume his morning nutrition paste." Dr. Vex, the court pediatrician, was the complete opposite of Torres. Where the Admiral was all bluster and drama, Vex was a nervous wreck who spoke in rapid, apologetic bursts. He had 6 arms, which should have made him more efficient, but mostly he just used them to fidget with different medical instruments simultaneously. Oh dear," Vex muttered, wringing 4 hands while taking notes with the other 2. "The prince's emotional fluctuations are off the charts. His last tantrum registered 7.3 on the psychic disruption scale. The previous nanny is still in therapy. Such a nice Sortakian woman. Loved children. Now she can't even look at a playground without hyperventilating. Then there were the failed nannies themselves. Thane had thoughtfully arranged for me to meet a few of them, probably thinking their experiences would be helpful. It was like interviewing survivors of a natural disaster. The singing, whispered Nanny Crex, a three-eyed alien who now worked in accounting. He doesn't like lullabies. When I tried to sing him to sleep, he made all the windows in the North Tower explode. Beautiful voice, though. Could probably shatter glass professionally if he applied himself. I tried everything, said former Nanny Trill, who had developed a nervous twitch. Structured play, educational activities, even brought in a professional entertainer from the Vega system. The clown is still in intensive care. Never seen anyone turn that shade of purple before. But honestly, the real challenge wasn't the palace, the dramatic alien advisors, or the traumatized former nannies. It was Zephyr himself. The kid I'd successfully put in timeout at Roosevelt Elementary was apparently just having an off day. At full power, Prince Zephyr could redecorate a room just by having feelings about it. My first day on the job, he threw a tantrum because his breakfast wasn't cut into the right shapes. The dining room ceiling cracked, 3 suits of ceremonial armor started dancing, and I'm pretty sure the royal portrait started crying, actual tears, from painted eyes. This is when 15 years of classroom management experience really paid off. While everyone else was running around trying to figure out how to fix reality-bending supernatural chaos, I walked over to Zephyr, got down to his eye level, and used the voice. Zephyr, I said, calm as anything, we use our words, not our powers. The dancing armor froze mid-waltz. The ceiling stopped cracking. 20 palace staff members stared at me like I'd just performed a miracle. But the shapes are wrong, Zephyr said, and his voice was just like any other 5-year-old who wasn't getting his way. I see that, I said. What shapes would you like? Stars, he said. Like the ones we visit. So I cut his nutrition paste into star shapes. Problem solved. No reality manipulation required, just basic communication skills and the willingness to make breakfast a little more interesting. Of course, Thane witnessed this entire exchange from the doorway, still wearing his full imperial regalia, because apparently the man slept in armor. He looked at me like I'd just invented fire. How? He asked. Easy, I said. I asked him what he wanted instead of assuming he was just being difficult. Sometimes the simplest solution is the right one. That was my first victory. Small, maybe, but in a palace where the previous nanny had required sedation after the breakfast incident, it felt pretty significant. Plus, I'd managed to avoid any structural damage to imperial property, which already put me ahead of the curve. 3 weeks into my new career as royal nanny to the galaxy's most destructive 5-year-old, I thought I was getting the hang of things. Zephyr and I had established a routine. Morning star-shaped breakfast, educational playtime that didn't involve accidentally sending furniture to other dimensions, afternoon naps that only resulted in minor psychic disturbances, and bedtime stories that I carefully screened to avoid anything with explosions. Then Ambassador Krill from the Zorblat Confederacy decided to pay a diplomatic visit, and suddenly my biggest worry wasn't whether Zephyr would eat his vegetables, but whether he'd accidentally start an interstellar war. This is a disaster, Thane said, pacing in his war room while Admiral Corex dramatically gesticulated at a holographic display of the Zorblat fleet. The Zorblat have been looking for an excuse to break our peace treaty for years. If Zephyr has even one incident during the state dinner, the consequences would be catastrophic. Corex proclaimed, because apparently he was contractually obligated to make everything sound like the opening of an epic poem, or across 17 star systems. Billions of lives hanging in the balance, all dependent upon a child's ability to use proper table manners. Dr. Vex was having what I could only describe as a 6-armed panic attack. The stress levels, oh dear, the stress levels are astronomical. The prince's emotional readings are already elevated just from the change in routine. And the Zorblat delegation includes children. What if they don't get along? What if there's a playground incident? I'd been listening to this chaos for 20 minutes before I finally held up a hand. Okay, everyone take a breath. Well, except you, Correx, you might hyperventilate. Here's what we're going to do. The plan was simple, which in a palace full of beings who considered military strategy a form of art, made it revolutionary. First, I explained to Zephyr exactly what was happening. No sugarcoating, no trying to hide the importance of the situation. Kids are smarter than adults give them credit for, and they can handle the truth if you present it right. So these visitors are kind of grumpy? Zephyr asked, sitting cross-legged on his bed while I laid out his formal clothes. And if I use my powers, they might get mad at Daddy? Exactly, I said. But here's the thing, kiddo. You don't need your powers to be impressive. You're smart, you're funny, and you know more about 17 different star systems than most adults. That's pretty amazing. The state dinner was held in the Grand Hall, which was basically what would happen if Versailles and a spaceship had a baby. And that baby was raised by interior designers with unlimited budgets and questionable taste. 300 guests, including Ambassador Krill, who looked like a cross between a shark and a very judgmental librarian. I'd prepared for this like a military operation. Zephyr had a special juice box, his favorite snacks cut into shapes he approved of, and a quiet corner where he could retreat if things got overwhelming. I'd also convinced Thane to let me sit next to Zephyr at the head table, which required some creative diplomacy since apparently my security clearance wasn't high enough for that level of protocol breach. Everything was going perfectly until the Zorblat children started showing off. My daddy conquered the Vega system when I was 3, announced little Zex Krill, who was maybe 6 and already had the superiority complex of a career politician. Well, my daddy owns 12 planets, replied Zex's sister, Zara, not to be outdone. Zephyr, who had been quietly eating his star-shaped appetizers, looked up with interest. My daddy owns lots of planets too. Want to see? I recognized that tone. It was the same one he'd used right before the great classroom furniture rearrangement incident. It's time for emergency intervention. Zephyr, I said quietly. Remember what we talked about? Words, not powers. But I just want to show them the pretty one with the purple moons, he said, and I could see the telltale glow starting in his eyes. This is where 3 weeks of careful relationship building paid off. Instead of panicking or trying to shut him down, I leaned over and whispered, "How about you tell them about it instead? You're really good at stories." And he was. For the next 10 minutes, Prince Zephyr regaled the Zorblat children with tales of the worlds in his father's empire. He described crystal cities and floating mountains, oceans that sang and forests that glowed. He didn't need to bend reality to impress them. His words painted pictures that were better than any light show. Ambassador Krill, who had been watching this entire exchange with the expression of someone expecting disaster, gradually relaxed. By the end of dinner, he was actually laughing at Zephyr's story about the planet where it rained soup every Thursday. Your son, he told Thane during the toast, is a remarkable child. Intelligent, well-mannered, and clearly well cared for. The Zorblat Confederacy is pleased to continue our peaceful relations with the Thex Empire. Crisis averted, treaty secured, and not a single piece of furniture sent to another dimension. I was starting to think this whole royal nanny thing might actually work out. Just when I thought I had this whole galactic childcare thing figured out, the universe decided to throw me a curveball in the form of an actual galactic crisis. Because apparently my job description didn't just include preventing tantrums and ensuring proper nutrition intake. It also involved saving civilization as we know it. It started with Dr. Vex rushing into the morning playroom session, all 6 arms flailing in what I'd learned was his catastrophic news gesture. Oh dear, terrible readings, absolutely terrible. The prince's emotional resonance patterns, they're not just random, they're connected to something much larger. In common galactic, please, Doc, I said, while Zephyr continued building what appeared to be a scale model of the solar system out of blocks that definitely weren't following normal physics. The prince's powers, Vex explained, wringing his hands, they're not just telekinetic abilities. They're connected to the cosmic grid, the underlying energy network that holds space-time together. When he gets upset, he's not just moving objects, he's creating ripples in reality itself. This explained a lot, actually. Like why his tantrums seemed to affect things that should have been completely unrelated. Or why sometimes the palace's quantum generators would start humming lullabies after his bedtime routine. But the real crisis came when Admiral Corex burst in with news that the Void Seekers, a nomadic race that fed on cosmic energy, had detected the disturbances and were heading straight for the Thex Empire. They weren't just another military threat. They were reality vampires who could drain the life force from entire star systems. They're attracted to strong psychic emissions, Thane explained during the Emergency War Council. Zephyr's untrained abilities are like a beacon to them. We have maybe 72 hours before they arrive. The plan, as outlined by the military advisors, was typically simple and completely wrong. Suppress Zephyr's abilities entirely using some kind of psychic dampening field, eliminate the signal that was drawing the Void Seekers, and hope they'd lose interest and go away. Absolutely not, I said, which caused quite a stir in the war room. Apparently, kindergarten teachers don't usually contradict galactic military strategy. Maya, Thane said carefully, I understand your attachment to my son, but we're talking about the survival of billions of beings. No, you're talking about treating the symptom instead of the cause, I replied. You can't just suppress a child's natural abilities. That's like trying to stop a river by building a dam without a spillway. Eventually, the pressure builds up and something catastrophic happens. I'd seen it before, in kids who were told their creativity was too disruptive, their energy too much, their natural way of being somehow wrong. They either shut down completely or exploded in ways that hurt everyone around them. The previous nannies tried to control Zephyr's powers, I continued. They treated them like a problem to be managed instead of a natural part of who he is. That's why he's been having such intense episodes. He's fighting against everyone trying to make him smaller. Dr. Vex's nervous fidgeting suddenly stopped. Oh my, that would explain the escalating pattern. Each suppression attempt made the eventual release more powerful. We've been making the problem worse. The solution wasn't to eliminate Zephyr's connection to the cosmic grid, but to teach him how to use it purposefully. Instead of random emotional outbursts that sent chaotic signals across space-time, he needed to learn to channel his abilities constructively. Can you do that? Thane asked. Can you teach him that level of control in 72 hours? I don't know, I admitted. But I know that trying to force him to suppress who he is definitely won't work. We need to help him understand his powers, not hide from them. The next 3 days were like running an intensive preschool program while simultaneously trying to prevent the end of civilization. I worked with Zephyr on emotional regulation techniques, but instead of just managing his feelings, we practiced channeling them through his connection to the cosmic grid. When you feel angry, I explained, instead of letting it explode outward, try to send it down, like roots from a tree. Ground yourself in the grid, don't fight against it. It was like teaching meditation to a 5-year-old who could accidentally tear holes in space-time, which is exactly as challenging as it sounds. But Zephyr was smart, and more importantly, he trusted me. For the first time in his short life, an adult was telling him his powers weren't something to be ashamed of or afraid of. When the Void Seekers arrived, they found something they definitely weren't expecting. Instead of chaotic, uncontrolled psychic emissions, they encountered Prince Zephyr, sitting calmly in the palace garden, deliberately sending out a signal through the cosmic grid. But this wasn't a beacon of random energy they could feed on. It was structured, purposeful, and absolutely devastating to beings who thrived on chaos. Zephyr had turned his connection to the grid into a cosmic tuning fork, creating a resonance frequency that disrupted the Void Seekers' ability to process energy. They fled. The entire armada, these reality-devouring monsters that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia, took one taste of a properly trained 5-year-old's psychic abilities and decided they had urgent business elsewhere. How? Thane asked afterward, staring at his son, who was now peacefully napping in my lap after single-handedly saving the Empire. Simple, I said. I stopped trying to make him fit into what everyone else thought he should be, and started helping him become the best version of himself. 6 months later, I was standing in the Grand Hall again. But this time I wasn't worried about preventing diplomatic incidents or cosmic catastrophes. I was trying to figure out how to explain to the Galactic Council why my job title now included the phrase Minister of Child Development, and came with its own seat at the Imperial Cabinet. The coronation ceremony, if you could call it that, was Thane's idea. After word spread about how Earth-based child psychology had not only solved the Prince Zephyr situation but also saved the galaxy from the Void Seekers, suddenly everyone wanted to know more about human parenting techniques. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of various configurations, Admiral Corex announced with his usual flair for the dramatic, I present Maya Torres, Royal Nanny of the Thex Empire, defender of small children, bringer of juice boxes, and Minister of Child Development. The titles were getting a bit ridiculous, but the authority that came with them was real. I now had the power to establish child welfare standards across 17 star systems, a budget that could fund a small space program, and most importantly, the ability to ensure that no other kid would have to go through what Zephyr had experienced. Dr. Vex had become my deputy, applying his medical expertise to developing the first galactic standards for child psychology. His nervous energy was perfectly suited for detail-oriented policy work, and he'd already published 3 papers on emotional regulation in psychically gifted youngsters. The preliminary results are extraordinary, he reported, barely containing his excitement. 17 different species, 43 case studies, and in every single instance, the Earth-based approach of accepting and channeling natural abilities rather than suppressing them has yielded superior outcomes. Even the Zorblat Confederacy had requested consultation services after Ambassador Krill returned home with stories about Zephyr's transformation. Apparently, they had their own problematic psychic children who kept accidentally starting diplomatic incidents. But the real success story was Zephyr himself. The kid who used to destroy furniture when he got frustrated was now helping design playground equipment that could withstand the playstyles of superpowered children. His latest project was a sandbox that used controlled gravity fields to let kids build sculptures that would be impossible under normal physics. Maya, he said, tugging on my formal robes after the ceremony, can we go play in the garden? I want to show you something. The garden had become our favorite place, mainly because it was the only spot in the palace where Zephyr could practice his abilities without risking expensive art or structural damage. He led me to a corner where he'd been working on what he called his special project. It was a small grove of trees, but these weren't normal trees. They were growing in perfect geometric patterns, their branches intertwining to form complex mathematical shapes that shifted and changed as you watched. The leaves chimed softly in harmonics that were somehow both audible and felt directly in your bones. I made them sing, Zephyr said proudly. Not with my powers, though. I asked the cosmic grid very nicely if it would help the trees be musical. It said yes. This was the difference. Before, Zephyr's abilities had been reflexive, emotional responses that he couldn't control. Now he was having conversations with the fundamental forces of the universe, and they were apparently quite willing to collaborate on art projects. They're beautiful, I said, and meant it. What made you think to try this? You always said that feelings are okay, but we need to find good ways to show them, he explained with the matter-of-fact wisdom that 5-year-olds sometimes possessed. I was feeling happy about the new playground, so I wanted to make something happy too. That evening, after Zephyr was asleep and the palace had settled into its nighttime quiet, I found myself on the observation deck, looking out at the vast expanse of space. 3 moons hung in the sky, 2 of them purple, and somewhere out there were billions of beings living their lives in star systems I was now partially responsible for protecting. A year ago, my biggest concern was whether I had enough construction paper for the month and if Tommy Peterson would ever learn to keep his hands to himself during story time. Now I was developing interspecies child development protocols and had a direct line to the Galactic Emergency Response Team. Quite a career change, Thane said, joining me at the railing. He'd traded his formal armor for something more casual, though on him casual still looked like it could stop a meteorite. You could say that, I replied, though honestly the core job hasn't changed much. I'm still trying to help kids figure out how to be the best versions of themselves. It's just that now, Some of those kids can accidentally rearrange solar systems when they're having a bad day. The council wants to know if you'd consider expanding the program, he said. There are requests from 14 different planetary governments for consultation on psychically gifted children. The Andromedans are offering to build you your own research facility. I laughed, thinking about how I'd gone from managing crayon fights to preventing interstellar wars. You know what, why not? But I have conditions. Name them. First, every facility gets a proper playground. I don't care if it has to be quantum engineered for safety. Kids need somewhere to run around. Second, art supplies. Lots of them. You'd be amazed what a child can accomplish with finger paints and the freedom to be creative. And then third, juice boxes. The good kind, not that nutrition paste stuff you people seem to think passes for refreshment. Done, Thane said immediately. Anything else? I looked back toward the palace, where Prince Zephyr was sleeping peacefully, his dreams probably creating small auroras in his bedroom ceiling. Tomorrow we'd work on his lessons, play in the garden, and maybe figure out how to help him channel his connection to cosmic forces into something constructive. Just another day in the life of the galaxy's first royal nanny. Just one more thing, I said. Next time you need someone to handle an impossible child with reality-bending powers, and maybe start with asking nicely instead of trying to suppress everything that makes them special. You'd be surprised how much easier that makes everything. Thane nodded, and I could see him filing that advice away for future reference. After all, ruling a galactic empire was just large-scale child management, and I was quickly becoming the expert on that subject. Who knew that 15 years of kindergarten experience would turn out to be the perfect preparation for saving the universe? Life certainly has a sense of humor.